Today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful table runner. And you think it looks pretty complicated, right? Well, if you do it the way that I show you, it's actually very beginner friendly. So keep watching. For this project, you're going to need the usual items that you would need for making a quilt project, such as rotary cutters, also a ruler with clearly marked out points for the inches and also smaller. And then an optional thing that is useful is a strip cutter tool such as this. And then, definitely for this project, you need fusible on one side interfacing. And so this is a Pellon product. Any interfacing that has the fusible on one side like this will do. And then gather your fabric and we'll get started. This technique is called interleave, which means to arrange in or as if in alternate layers. So here I am arranging the fabric. By the way, welcome to my channel. This is Stephanie. And right here I'm getting some shot cotton assembled, and that's what I'm going to use. And what shot cotton is the weave is one color that is different than the weft. So now I'm assembling the layers, and I'm going to get these cut into 3.5 inch strips, but before I do that I have to make a cleanup cut. So here's my cleanup cut here, and then I will go ahead and measure out 3.5 inches, and then that way each one of these stripes will end up being 3 inches once it's sewn. So now that I have that done, I have to go through and do the other colors. So I have that one, and then I just have these last couple that need to be done. And now I can get my stripes assembled and put into the order in which I'm going to sew them together. So right now I'm putting them into the order here, and I'm going to stitch these together. So I'm stitching the first one, and just in the interest of time, I am not showing stitching all of them because that would be very tedious. So here I've actually got a bunch of the stripes joined together, and I'm just finishing up the stitching. So after I've pressed those seams open on the opposite side, I'm going to lay these stripe sets, or strip sets, whatever you want to call them, on top of each other. Now this tool is called a shape cut, and it has these little grooves that you can fit a rotary cutter into, and then they're marked off at 1 inch increments. So to do this pattern, you have to do 1 inches. And so these sorts of things, like Creative Grids also has a strip cutter like that as well. And it makes it so that you can cut a lot of strips very quickly that are a particular width. But you do have to be careful to make sure that you're cutting in the right place. So as you can see, I'm able to cut these strips very quickly. And out of this size, I was able to get 12 strips. So it just makes it very fast. I highly recommend getting this tool if you don't have it already, because it's useful for various projects. For example, if you were wanting to do a traditional BARGELLO, it would be useful for that as well. So here I've just cut the last bits that I actually need for this project, And I did end up with a few leftover strips that I didn't need. So now I'm going to go ahead and assemble them, but first I have interfacing that is fusible on one side, and so I'm just going through and marking it on one side of it. And you can't really see the lines, but I have a bunch of lines marked out. And then I'm just lining them up right now where they're more just kind of straight. And then now I'm starting to shift them over. And so the reason why I call this also a bargello is because each of these strip sets are actually being positioned offset from each other as they're going down. So it's kind of like a double bargello effect whenever you do the interleave this way. Because technically the interleave, you don't actually have to shift them side to side. So right now I'm just fusing this down. Of course I have a pressing mat underneath this because if I were to iron this right on my cutting mat, I would ruin it. So definitely make sure that you have a pressing mat or an ironing board. And so right now I'm just going to put some of these extra little 1-inch strips and just keep kind of curving them around back and forth against each other, and then eventually I'm able to go through and do enough for my entire table runner, which in this case ended up being around maybe 76 inches that I had to do. The other ways that I've seen interleave projects done is one is by quilt as you go, another one is just by simply sewing the strips together without any kind of way of reinforcing them. And the problem with these is that quilt as you go, you need a 1/4 inch foot, and then the other method depends on having a very definite 1/4 inch seam that is consistent all the way throughout the strips. Otherwise, you might start to have your project start to curve just a little bit and in ways that you don't want. So that's why using the fusible makes this a very beginner-friendly project. And then I found that using a rotary cutter was actually pretty effective. I could line that up with the ruler. I was also able to do this without the ruler pretty well too. But if you are new to using rotary cutters and rulers, I would definitely suggest putting the ruler up there and not just trying to cut it freehand. And then I just have my very sharp scissors for those parts where the rotary cutter wasn't able to take a little tiny bit off of the edge there. And I want to retain most of that seam just because it's going to be a much stronger piece if I do that. And so here I've got my pressing mat down again, and I'm just going to press all of these little seams open. A lot of times with an interleave quilt project, people will do it as a quilt as you go, and you could do that. However, I decided that I wanted it to be flatter, and whenever you do quilt as you go, it does end up pressing the seam to the side automatically. And so this is just a decision that I went with. If you want to do something where, if you want to have your project where you do it as quilt as you go, then that works fine too. And then just a little bit of water and it makes it real nice and flat. And so now I've finished up sewing all of my little strips and I'm just doing the final bit of pressing. And now I'm ready to go ahead and trim this to the width that I want to have this be for the final table runner. So as you can see, my width is going to be roughly about 12 inches. So I'm just checking in, it looks pretty good, and now I can work on my backing. So I have to trim off the side, and then I'm just cutting it so that it's a little bit wider than what I need. I think I cut it to about 13 inches. And then I'm able to place that on there, my top on there, and it's got enough space for me to feel comfortable. There's my batting, and I've got that measured out, and now I'm going to go ahead and just trim it so that it's about the right size so I can go ahead and do my quilting. So now I'm going to go ahead and form my sandwich. So the backing is right side down, and then the batting, and then I put the top over the top of that, and then I go ahead and pin it into place. So here I'm using 100 weight thread. I'm using that so that the thread is going to blend in. This is a case where I really want the piecing that I've done on this patchwork to stand out. And so I've chosen a thread that is going to blend in. On other projects I might use a heavier weight thread because I actually want the quilting to show up. And I can't actually stitch in the ditch on this one because I pressed it open. You don't want to stitch in the ditch whenever you press open. So I'm doing it just to the side of the seam. And the end result here is that you can't even really notice the stitching. So now I have to trim all of that excess backing and batting off so that I can get it to the 12 inches. And then that way I can get my binding ready and attach the binding. So now that I have that trimmed on the sides, I'm going to trim it on the edges, top and bottom, however you want to think of it. And then I decided on this green for my binding. It ends up going pretty well with most of the colors. And then I have cut my binding to 2 1/4. I'm using a thinner batting, so that works pretty well. And I'm able to use 3 strips here. That ended up being enough to do this. So you can take a ruler that has a 45-degree line and you can trim it that way. But I have an engineered corner or engineered miter tool that I like to use for my binding, and so this is what this is. And what's nice about that is it makes it so that I don't have additional that I have to clip off. See there, I have it pressed open and you can see how I didn't have to trim that off. So after I have the binding pressed, sewn together and then pressed where I folded it, now I can position this, I can sew it on. So here it's sewn on, and then I'm going to show how I join the binding. So 1/2 inch, mark that from the edge on one side, and then line it up over the other, and then on the bottom layer of that fold, just find where I marked it, and then go ahead and mark that across. And then I did that little fold there to kind of give me a sense of the direction of that miter. and then I was able to use that miter tool to cut that. And then it fits perfectly there, and I'm able to sew that together, and I'm able to finish attaching the binding all the way around. So now it's finished, and it looks really nice. So if you want to see another project where I use shot cotton, here is a throw pillow project that I made with shot cotton, and I think you're going to really love it. Thanks for watching.